It looks at how a camera profile affects what your image looks like. Camera profile in Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw, can have a major effect on what you're going to get. Let's start by looking at the different results, and then I'll show you how to choose those camera profiles. What you're looking at now is what's called the Astia camera profile. Fujifilm is medium format, and their smaller cameras are terrific in offering camera profiles that attempt to mimic the film behavior of their former, photographic films. So I tend to like Astia a lot when working with the Fujifilm GFX 100S or 102. It has a real nice balance of color, saturation, and so on without going overboard. You've got Provia, which is a little different. You can see the blues are a little less saturated. That's Astia. Provia, you get a little less contrast typically, a little less saturation in Provia versus Astia. And then comparing Astia to Classic Chrome, you can see Classic Chrome is much less saturation, a more muted look. The blues really come down, contrast changes in the clouds, and so on. You might notice that the colors look quite different. So if anybody tells you their camera has better color or whatever, something like that, the first question to ask them is, well, have you tried different profiles? Because the profile obviously has such an overwhelming effect on the total look that I don't know how you can really say that without getting real specific about what you mean by it. Anyway, Classic Chrome has its uses for some purposes. I think it's almost a documentary type thing. All right, then we've got back to Astia there. We've got Eterna, which is a real low contrast look, can be helpful for landscape scenes sometimes. And these profiles obviously can change the mood of the photo. So Astia is I would say a more upbeat, lively mood, whereas Eterna is almost more nostalgic, or because it's more muted and kind of more mellow. So consider that when you're choosing these profiles. One size doesn't fit all. All right, there's Astia again. We can go to ProNeg Standard, which is not too different from Eterna, except maybe a little more contrasty and saturated. We got ProNeg High, which there's Standard, ProNeg High. A little more saturation on ProNeg High, a little more contrast. Okay, backing up to Astia. Then there's Velvia, which is over the top. If you look down here at the bottom at these greens or these blues, let's go back to Velvia. The blues didn't change a whole lot, but the greens sure as heck got awfully saturated down towards the bottom and in the distance. So did the oranges. See that saturation difference? The contrast changes. Notice you're losing detail in the clouds with Velvia. It's a pretty contrasty profile. So I rarely use Velvia for that reason. Then you can use a monochrome profile. This is Acros plus R, which means a red filter. And there's a whole bunch of these monochrome ones. So that's another way to do monochrome conversion. And then, of course, those are just the Fujifilm ones. You have Adobe has a host of them, like Adobe Color. And I like Adobe Color. It's a good all-around profile. Doesn't make anything too hot or too saturated, too contrasty. Just pretty good. But for this scene, I'm not too excited about it. I'd probably rather have like Classic Chrome. See, there's Classic Chrome. There's Adobe. Classic Chrome feels a little more nostalgic to me. Eterna. So you can and look at what's happening to the blue difference. The blues in the sky with Eterna. That doesn't look like blue sky to me. It looks like more like a washed out negative film thing, where the Adobe Color has a much more accurate blue sky. And then when you compare, say, Adobe Color to Astia, that's Astia. It's a real rich, vibrant blue. Adobe Color is probably more accurate, but I tend to like the Astia. So that's just a sampler. Let's take a look at how you do this. When you open an image in the Adobe Camera Raw dialog, up at top you'll see the profile over here, and you can pick the profile you want. Now I've added a bunch of these as favorites so I can quickly just pick one, but you're probably going to have to do browse, and then it'll show you all these things, and you can actually just mouse over these guys like this. And that's a little hard because they're arranged in columns you kind of have to figure out what you like. There's sepia, black and whites. You got all these variants, and these are just the camera matching ones, right? Like there's bleach bypass and classic neg. These all have uses, and then Adobe, of course, has a set of their own: monochrome, color. We've got Adobe Color, Adobe Landscape, Portrait, Adobe Vivid, which isn't all that vivid actually, and then we've got these ones that are called artistic, which I call the crap filters. Like if you want to make it look like a shitty iPhone photo, then, well, these might be for you. Well, they probably have their uses, but I would just retitle this as shitty, fake-looking crap filters, or camera profiles rather. But there's a use for everything, so they could be useful. We got various black and white renditions, bank, different levels of contrast, all the way to, this is a way if you just want a quick conversion, you might grab one of these. You got modern, which is more junky iPhone type stuff, in my opinion. Stay away from, they've whacked the contrast and color. It's like, all right, if you're doing Instagram and want to grab instant visual attention, maybe you'll like one of those. Vintage, these are a little better because they don't do so much with the contrast. It's more like, let's make it look crappy like old cameras. But again, certain photos you may find one that floats your boat in terms of the effect you want. So I'm not really saying these are bad, the modern and vintage ones. I'm just saying that if you use them too much, you're going to rapidly have the same, well, pretty banal look, I think, and overdone. So to add one of these, you basically right-click on it and say Add to Favorites. So I'll add Bleach Bypass to Favorites, and now there it is. It's done. I'll go back, and now in this menu I should see Bleach Bypass in here. Yeah, there it is right there. So that's how we work it in Adobe Camera Raw. Lightroom is basically the same. Always set this camera profile first before. Always set white balance, temperature, and tint is that I recommend doing first to get you close to what it ought to be, and then play with the camera profile, and then maybe adjust the white balance slightly, and go back and forth between these two things before you mess around with most other things. The exception being if the picture's too dark, like here, you might want to do your push first to get it into the brightness range you want. And by the way, when you change that camera profile, maybe you want a dramatic look like that with bleach bypass at maybe a 0.33 push. That is something, again, that interacts with the look and feel of these other two things. All right, well, that's our quick look, and cancel out of that, and we're done.